If you've ever watched someone you love get underestimated by people who should have known better, you already understand how this story feels. Stay with me till the end. You won't regret it. Chidinma had learned, over 8 years of marriage, that her husband Do-yoon said maybe 10 unnecessary words a day. He wasn't cold, he was just quiet in the way old stone is quiet. Solid, unbothered, giving nothing away. She used to tease him about it during their first year together, back when she was still learning the shape of him. "You know," she said once, watching him fix his cufflinks in the mirror. "In my father's house, silence meant a man was hiding something. And in mine," Do-yoon said, not looking up, "silence means a man has already said what needed saying." She'd laughed at that. She still did some mornings, when he'd answer a whole argument with a single raised eyebrow. Their son, Kunle, was 7, loud in every way his father wasn't, and utterly unbothered by the quiet. He filled their house with the kind of noise Chidinma had grown up around. Big laughter, big questions, big feelings worn right on the surface. Do-yoon adored him for it. She could see it in the way he'd lower his newspaper just to watch the boy build towers out of couch cushions, in the way his mouth would twitch at the corners even when he said nothing at all. It was a good life. Maybe too good, she sometimes thought, though she never said it out loud. The house in Seoul's quiet hillside district. The driver who called her Madam with real warmth instead of performance. The mother-in-law, Grandma Sunyi, who still hadn't fully accepted her, but had, over the years, softened into something like grudging respect. Chidinma had married into old money. That's what everyone assumed, anyway. Do-yoon ran a modest import business. Modest being the word people used when they meant boring. He wore the same 3 suits in rotation. He drove himself to work most days. When people at dinner parties asked what he did, he'd say, "Logistics." And that would be the end of it, because nothing about him invited a follow-up question, which is exactly why Hyunwoo Baek made the mistake he made. Baek was the kind of man who measured other men by how loud their money was. He'd built his family's construction empire on decades of loud money, loud buildings, loud parties, loud threats when threats were useful. He'd wanted the hillside land under Do-yoon's house for 3 years, ever since the city announced a new rail line that would run past it. He'd sent 2 offers. Both had been declined, politely, in writing, by a lawyer Do-yoon barely seemed to know. So when the 3rd refusal came, Baek decided the family didn't understand who they were dealing with. Old money with no muscle behind it, he told his lawyer over lunch, cutting into his steak like the thought pleased him. A quiet husband and a foreign wife. There's nobody to be afraid of in that house. He didn't know that 4 blocks from where he was eating, a man named Jinhyo, who ran 3 of the city's largest logistics companies and answered ultimately to nobody but Do-yoon, had just closed a call about a shipment that had nothing to do with imports and everything to do with the fact that half the judges in Seoul owed their careers to favors nobody talked about out loud. He didn't know that the modest business had roots that went back 2 generations, back to a grandfather who'd built something out of the wreckage of war that had long since stopped needing a name. He didn't know any of it, and that was the whole problem. The trouble started on a Tuesday, the way trouble often does, disguised as an inconvenience. Chidinma was at Kunle's school for a parent meeting when the headmistress called her aside, apologetic and stiff. There'd been an administrative issue with the family's account. Tuition, paid faithfully for 3 years, was suddenly flagged as unpaid. Kunle's enrollment was, regrettably, under review. She sat in the car afterward for a long moment before calling Do-yoon, her hands steady even though her voice wasn't. "They're saying we haven't paid," she said. "Kunle's school. They're saying there's a problem with the account." There was a pause on the line. Not long. Just long enough for her to notice it. "I'll handle it," Do-yoon said. "Do-yoon," she said his name the way she always did when she wanted the real answer, not the short one. "Is this about the land? The back offers?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice hadn't changed at all, which somehow told her more than if it had. "Don't worry about the school," he said. "Pick up Kunle, come straight home." She sat with the phone against her ear a second longer, listening to nothing, and felt something cold settle low in her stomach. Not fear exactly, but its quieter cousin. the feeling of standing at the edge of something she couldn't yet see the size of. That night, after Kunle was asleep, she found Do-yoon on the balcony, still in his work clothes, looking out at the city like it owed him an answer. "Talk to me," she said, standing beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Not the short version, the real one. He was quiet for a moment, and this time the silence felt different. Not the comfortable kind she'd grown used to, but something heavier, like a door being weighed before it opened. "There are things about my family," he said slowly, "that I never told you because I hoped I'd never have to." "Tell me now," she said. "Whatever it is, I married you. Not the version of you that keeps secrets on balconies." He turned to look at her then, and for the first time in a long while, she saw something unguarded cross his face. Not fear, but the ache of a man about to hand someone the weight he'd carried alone for years. "Okay," he said quietly. "Sit with me. Before we go further, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching this from tonight, and what time it is right where you are. Drop it in the comments. I always love reading where everyone's tuning in from." Do-yoon didn't tell her everything that night. He told her enough. He told her about his grandfather, who'd come back from the war with nothing but a name and a debt to men who'd saved his life more than once. He told her how that debt turned into loyalty, and loyalty turned into a network, and the network turned into something that outlived the war entirely. Quiet arrangements, quiet favors, quiet control over parts of the city most people never thought to look at. He told her his father had expanded it without ever raising his voice once. And he told her that he had inherited it the same way you inherit a family's eyes or a father's laugh, without ever being asked if he wanted it. "I kept it away from you," he said, "because I wanted one part of my life that was just ours. Just you, me, Kunle. Ordinary." Chidinma sat with that for a long moment, watching the city lights instead of his face. "I'm not scared of what you are," she said finally. "I'm scared of what you didn't think I could carry." "That's not—" "Let me finish." Her voice was gentle but firm, the same voice she used when Kunle tried to argue his way out of bedtime. "I left my whole family behind to build a life with you. I have carried harder things than a secret, Do-yoon. What hurts is that you thought you had to protect me from you." He reached for her hand in the dark, and for once, he didn't need words at all. She let him hold it. The next day, Baek made his second move. It started with a phone call to the bank. Polite, procedural, devastating. Do-yoon's business accounts, the ones that funded the household, were suddenly under review for irregular activity. It wasn't true. It didn't need to be true. It only needed to be inconvenient enough to make a quiet man sweat in front of his wife. Chidinma found out when she tried to pay for groceries and her card was declined, the cashier's face flushing with second-hand embarrassment as the line behind her grew. She didn't panic. She'd learned, over the years, that panic was a currency Do-yoon's world didn't accept. She simply paid in cash, thanked the cashier, and called her husband from the car. "They're coming for the money now," she said, keeping her voice even for Kunle's sake, who was humming to himself in the back seat. "The card just got declined at the store." "I know," Do-yoon said. His voice, for the first time she could remember, had an edge to it. Not panic, but something colder. Focus. "Baek thinks he's found my weak point." "Has he?" "No," Do-yoon said. "He's found the wrong one." That evening, Jin-ho came to the house for the first time Chidinma had ever seen him step past the front gate. He was a broad, unsmiling man who bowed to her with real respect and then disappeared into Do-yoon's study for 2 hours. When he left, Do-yoon didn't explain anything, but something in the set of his shoulders had shifted. The softness she loved was still there, but underneath it now sat something she hadn't seen before. Something built for exactly this. A few days later, Grandma Sunyi arrived unannounced, sweeping into the kitchen with the particular energy of a woman who'd survived worse men than Hyunwoo Baek. "You look tired," she told Chidinma bluntly, setting a pot on the stove without asking permission. "Sit, I'll cook. You need to keep your strength for what's coming." "You know what's happening," Chidinma said. It wasn't a question. "I raised the man who's handling it," Sunyi said. "Of course I know." She glanced sideways and for the first time in 8 years, something like warmth passed between them. Not affection exactly, but recognition. Two women who loved the same quiet, dangerous man. He chose well when he chose you, she added, almost too quietly to hear. You don't run. Most women would have run by now. I'm not most women, Chidinma said. Sunyi almost smiled. No, she agreed. You're not. That night, after Kunle fell asleep clutching the small wooden lion Do-yoon had carved him years ago, Chidinma found her husband in his study, staring at a folder full of documents she couldn't read the meaning of, only the weight. Tell me the plan, she said, sitting across from him. There isn't a clean one, he admitted. Beck thinks I'm an old money husband hiding behind a boring business. He's going to keep pushing until he finds out how wrong he is. I'd rather he find out on my terms than his. And Kunle, the school? Already handled, Do-yoon said, quietly. He won't know it happened. She studied his face in the low lamplight. The same face she'd fallen for over shared coffee and terrible early jokes. The same face that had held their newborn son like something breakable and precious. It hadn't changed, but she was seeing all of it now, not just the part he'd let her see. I love you, she said. All of you, not just the parts that were easy to explain. He looked at her like she'd handed him something he didn't know he'd been waiting for. I don't deserve how calm you're being about this, he said quietly. You don't get to decide that, she said, almost smiling despite everything. That's my job now too. Quick pause before we go on. If you're new here, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is on your side of the world. I read every single comment, and it genuinely makes these stories feel less like a screen and more like a room full of people. 2 nights later, Baek made his boldest move yet. A public one. At a business gala neither of them could avoid without raising questions, he cornered Do-yoon by the bar, smiling the way men smile when they think they've already won. Heard your accounts are having some trouble, Baek said, swirling his glass. Shame. Should really consider a partner who can protect his family properly. I could make this whole land issue disappear, you know. For the right price. Do-yoon looked at him for a long moment. The same unreadable calm he wore into every room. You should be careful, he said finally. Assuming quiet means weak. Baek laughed, waving the comment off like smoke. We'll see, he said, and walked away, utterly unaware that across the room, 3 of his own board members had just quietly accepted a meeting with a man named Jinho, a meeting that would take place before sunrise the next day. The insider struck first, and none of them saw it coming from that direction. Her name was Auntie Ngozi in the family's eyes only, Do-yoon's cousin by marriage, a woman who'd spent a decade managing the household accounts and quietly resenting how invisible that made her. She'd watched Do-yoon inherit power he never asked for, while she managed spreadsheets nobody thanked her for. When Baek's people approached her 3 weeks earlier with money and the promise of recognition, she hadn't hesitated as long as she later told herself she had. She was the one who told Baek what Do-yoon really was. Baek received the information sitting in the wreckage of his own collapsing empire, and for a moment he simply laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. Then the fear set in, the real kind, the kind that makes desperate men more dangerous, not less. If he's what you say he is, Baek told Ngozi over the phone, voice shaking, then I'm already dead, unless I make sure he has more to lose than I do. 2 days later, outside Kunle's school, a man in a gray uniform who'd been dismissed as nothing more than a lingering delivery worker suddenly moved. Chidinma was 3 car lengths away, walking up for pickup, when she saw it happen, the man's hand closing around Kunle's wrist, pulling him toward the gate's side entrance. She didn't scream. She ran. Kunle! Her voice tore out of her, raw, and something in her chest went cold and sharp all at once. She reached them before security did, grabbing her son's other arm, refusing to let go even as the man yanked back, even as Kunle's small hand gripped her sleeve so hard it left marks. Do-yoon's men arrived in under a minute, but a minute had never felt so long in her life. The man was subdued, dragged off, and Kunle was sobbing into her shoulder, and Chidinma stood there shaking with a fury she'd never felt before in her entire life. When Do-yoon arrived 20 minutes later, she didn't run to him for comfort. She stood her ground. You told me nothing would get close, she said, voice trembling but steady. He had his hands on our son. I know. Do-yoon's jaw was tight. His composure cracked in a way she'd never seen. I know, and it won't happen again. I'm ending this tonight. No, she said. We're ending this. Together, I am done being told to trust from a distance. That night, Do-yoon went to confront the man responsible for the school directly. Not Baek, but the middleman who'd hired him, a contact buried 3 layers deep in Baek's crumbling network. It went wrong before it went right. A blade caught his forearm in the scuffle, deep enough that he came home with his sleeve soaked through, jaw clenched against the pain, refusing the hospital until Chedinma physically blocked the door. Sit down, she said, voice shaking now with something other than anger. Let me look at it. I'm fine. You are not fine, and I am not asking. She cleaned the wound herself, hands steady despite the tears finally slipping free. The fear she'd been holding back all day, breaking loose now that the danger had passed. You keep trying to carry all of this so I don't have to feel it. I feel it anyway, Do-yoon. Let me actually help you instead of just watching you bleed quietly. He looked at her, pale from blood loss, and for once didn't argue. Okay, he said softly. Help me. Before the final stretch of this story, I want to know, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it there? I love that we're all reading this together from completely different corners of the world. Drop it below. It was Chedinma, not Do-yoon, who found the last piece. Going through the school's visitor logs the next morning, refusing to simply wait at home while others handled it, she noticed a name that had signed in twice in the past month, under a maintenance contractor's badge. A name she recognized only because she'd seen it before, years earlier, on an old household payroll list Ngozi herself had once shown her in passing. She called Do-yoon immediately. It's her, she said. Ngozi. The contractor's assistant who signed in. That's an alias she used to use for her sister's cleaning business. She's the one feeding him information. The confirmation moved fast after that. By evening, Ngozi had been confronted quietly. Her betrayal laid bare not with cruelty, but with a kind of tired disappointment from the family that seemed to hurt her more than anger would have. She confessed everything, the resentment, the years of feeling unseen, the money that had felt in the moment like the only recognition she'd ever get. But Baek didn't wait to find out his last asset had crumbled. Desperate, cornered, and out of options, he came to the house himself that night, not with an army, but with a gun, and a mind that had stopped calculating risk days ago. He got as far as the garden gate before Do-yoon's men closed around him, but Chedinma was already outside with Kunle safely locked behind her, standing between the danger and her family without a moment's hesitation, refusing to retreat even as Do-yoon urged her back. Look at what you built, Baek said, breathing hard, gun trembling slightly in his hand. And you'd let it all end because of one house. No, Do-yoon said quietly, stepping forward, calm even now, even with his arm still bandaged from the night before. I built all of it to protect this one house. Everything else was just the cost. The standoff ended not in violence, but in the quiet arrival of the same men Baek had once dismissed as background noise, his own former allies, called in one final time, disarming him before a single shot could be fired. He was led away, finished in every sense that mattered, his name already fading from every place he'd once held power. Weeks later, the house had found its rhythm again. Kunle laughed loudly through dinner like nothing had ever threatened him. Do-yoon's arm had healed into a thin scar he now wore without hiding it, the first physical mark he'd ever let Chedinma see and ask about openly. Sitting on the balcony together that night, she took his bandaged arm gently into her hands. I used to think I fell in love with your silence, she said. Now I think I fell in love with everything you were protecting with it. And I'm glad I finally got to help protect it too. If this story held you the way it held me while writing it, hit like, subscribe if this is your first time here, and tell me in the comments which moment made your chest tighten the most. I read every single one, and honestly, that's the best part of doing this. See you in the next story.